Hello! Today, the Multimedia Museum of the New Chronology is starting a series of podcasts featuring the founders of the New Chronology, academician of the Russian Academy of Sciences and professor at Moscow State University Anatoly Fomenko, and candidate of Physical and Mathematical Sciences and associate professor at Moscow State University Gleb Nosovsky. Visitors to our museum and social media followers have been asking many questions to the authors of the New Chronology. As of today, the majority of questions are related to their expedition to Jerash, which Anatoly Fomenko and Gleb Nosovsky conducted in 2019. That's why we have decided to dedicate our first podcasts to their new book, Phony Jerusalem, which was written based on the results of this expedition. Today, we have Anatoly Fomenko with us. Hello, Anatoly Timofeyevich.
Hello, Svetlana. Thank you for the introduction. I am very pleased to address those who are listening to us today. I hope we can tell you about the very beginning of our chronological research. Let's briefly start with where the real Jerusalem was located. According to our reconstruction, this Jerusalem is Yeras. It is located on the Bosporus Strait, not far from Istanbul. There are many maps, including medieval maps. I am showing a modern map where two remarkable points are marked on the Asian side of the Bosporus. This is Yeras, an old city, an old fortress, believed to date back to the 12th century, and nearby is Mount Beykoz, the highest point on the Asian side of the Bosporus. According to our reconstruction, this is where the Gospel events unfolded. Yeras is the Gospel Jerusalem, and Mount Beykoz is Mount Golgotha, where Jesus Christ was crucified in the year 1185. Today, there is a sanctuary on this mountain worshipped by Muslims. It is called the Sanctuary of Saint Yusha. Yusha, apparently, is one of the names of Jesus. Yusha and Jesus. The sounds sh and s often interchanged with each other. This is a fenced-off area of approximately 17 by 3 meters, and trees grow on this part of the land. According to our reconstruction, this is not the real tomb of Yusha and Jesus. This is the setting, marking the place where Jesus, also known as Andronikos Christ, was crucified. Today, many people come here to worship, but, of course, they worship Yusha, forgetting that we should actually understand that this is the place of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. Here, on the summit of Mount Beykoz, there used to be an old temple. Today, there is a mosque there, a territory for pilgrims who come here, a fence surrounding the crucifixion site. Around this fence, there is a concrete wall. You can see an aerial view, a map of this sanctuary, the temple, the surrounding wall, the place of worship, and the tomb of Jesus. Naturally, this is a pseudo-tomb. Inside the area enclosed by the fence, there are two large stones. Next to one of the stones is a pole with a golden topping. Apparently, it marks the actual place of the crucifixion of Andronikos Christ. The second stone, at the other end of the enclosed area, is the place where the body was laid. Those interested can go to Istanbul, visit this place. It is open to visitors and is very romantic, leaving a profound impression. Old depictions have been preserved, showing the view of Jerusalem, also known as Yeros, and Mount Beikaz. Today, there are small tours available. All of this is located near the entrance to the Black Sea. Directly from the top of Mount Beikaz and from the territory of Yeros, Jerusalem, you can see the exit to the Black Sea, the northern entrance to the Bosporus. On old maps, this place is marked as Mount Heracles, and many legends are associated with this place. Christ was here under various names, including the name Heracles. The center of the world used to be located in Jerusalem. Old three-petal maps have been preserved. You can see one of the maps in the photo. The three petals depict Europe, Asia, and Africa, with Jerusalem at the center. According to our reconstruction, as described in our book, this is indeed Yeros, the Bosporus Strait, which is geographically at the center, where Europe, Asia, and Africa converge. This is briefly about where the real Gospel Jerusalem was. Let's move on to the question of why the authentic Jerusalem was forgotten, and new Jerusalems emerged. A significant contribution to the multiplication of Jerusalems was made during the Reformation and the time of troubles, when, according to our reconstruction, the great empire fragmented into separate states. In particular, reformers began rewriting history, seeking to obscure the true picture of Russia Horde. Naturally, this also applied to the authentic Jerusalem of the Gospels, Yeros, Tsargrad on the Bosporus. They decided to designate another point on the map as Jerusalem. However, in addition, the emergence of new Jerusalems seems to have been driven by another important consideration. During the era of the Empire in the 13th to 16th centuries, holy places associated with Christ and the Holy Family became objects of worship for believers. This is understandable. Christianity had become the state religion of the vast Horde Empire. Many people wanted to worship and traveled to holy places. Numerous pilgrims flocked to the place of Christ's birth, the place of baptism, the place of crucifixion, the place of ascension, the place of burial, the mountain where God gave Moses the stone tablets, and so on. Obviously, soon the rulers of the empire became concerned about the problem that had arisen. The holy places were becoming trampled and destroyed. Thousands of people came here. Many pilgrims wanted to take a handful of soil or a piece of stone from a monument as a souvenir for their worship. In addition, this pilgrimage interfered with the narrow circle of the imperial elite from performing their family rituals, which were not intended for commoners. Furthermore, there was another important consideration. The holy places were scattered across the map of Europe and Asia, far apart from each other. Let me remind you of our reconstruction. Christ's birthplace was at Cape Violent in Crimea. Christ's baptism was in the Bosporus Strait, also referred to as the River Jordan at the time. The crucifixion of Andronikos Christ took place in Yeros Tsargrad, which I mentioned earlier, on Mount Beikaz, also known as the Gospel Golgotha. The burial of Christ and the Virgin Mary was initially in Egypt, in Proto-Abu Simbel, and then relocated to a grand mound on Mount Nemrut in southeastern Turkey. The biblical Mount Sinai, also known as Mount Zion, is Mount Vesuvius in Italy, and so on. It is clear that, despite all the desire, a sincere pilgrim could not visit all the authentic holy places of Christianity in a reasonable amount of time, as they were located in different lands and spread over thousands of kilometers. Thus, the rulers of the empire were faced with the need to separate the sacred mysteries performed by the elite, that is, for themselves, from the mass worship of pilgrim crowds. They found a solution. They decided to create compact models, props, so to speak, where all the main models of holy places would be presented in a limited space. And they decided to hide the authentic holy places, the originals, the primary sources, from the public eye and protect them from prying eyes. In doing so, they achieved several objectives. Firstly, they separated places of worship for the few nobles from the new places of worship for the common people. Secondly, at the created exhibitions, numerous replicas of all the holy places were assembled on a relatively small territory. This significantly facilitated the process of worship for pilgrims. Pilgrims traveled from afar, overcoming many obstacles to reach Jerusalem. For example, they sailed on ships from England to the territory of present-day Jordan. Then, when they arrived in the New Jerusalem, they could visit almost all the major holy imitations. Here, the tour guides confidently told him, is the cave of Christ's birth. Over there, not far, the place of baptism, to the right is Mount Golgotha. And there, a few kilometers away, the famous Mount Zion or Sinai. And so on. It was a very reasonable idea, and it was put into practice. The first such New Jerusalem was created in Jerash. It is a temple complex located in present-day Jordan. In reality, Jerash is a slightly distorted name of Yeras. It was a grand complex of temples, alleys, buildings, and colonnades. It was actually built in the 13th century as a sanctuary of the royal Christianity at that time. Later, it apparently became a memorial site where the sarcophagi with the mummies of Christ and the Virgin Mary rested temporarily when they were transferred from Egypt, from Proto-Abu Simbel to southeastern Turkey, to a mound on Mount Nemrut. Then, Jerash was transformed into an exhibition model of Jerusalem. This was, so to speak, the first New Jerusalem. It was located in the Ottoman Empire and was under the control of the sultans. This set complex, the New Exhibition Jerusalem, operated until the mid-17th century when Sultan Murad IV changed the religion in the state. He essentially abolished the previous ancient Orthodox Christianity and introduced what is now called Islam. Clearly, after such a serious religious reform, Jerash, the fake Jerusalem, lost its significance as a place of worship for Christians and was abandoned. It was covered with sand, and after some time, in the 17th or 18th century, a powerful mudslide swept over it, destroying many temples and covering the main part of the ancient city with multi-meter deposits. In this state, forgotten Jerash stood until the beginning of the 20th century when it finally began to be excavated. Now, let's take a look at what Jerash looks like. Here is Sultan Murad IV. This is a photograph of the thick layer of deposits that covered the first New Jerusalem Jerash. It was buried under a layer of earth. The huge amphitheaters of Jerash were completely covered with sediment. Today, a part of them has been excavated. It can be seen how deep they are today in the ground under a huge mass of deposits. Currently, only a portion of Jerash has been excavated. When visitors come to Jerash, they see the excavated part on this map. It is a vast area, but an even larger area remains unexcavated, hidden under the later houses and settlements of local residents. The excavated part is impressive. These are huge complexes, extensive colonnades stretching for kilometers. Today, very few of these columns remain, but even what remains makes a tremendous impression. You can take a look at our journey through Jerash. We were there in 2019, carefully examined the entire complex, drew conclusions, compared it with the description in the Russian Chronicle, and based on that, this book, we are presenting today, was born. In the photo, you can see an aerial view of one of the main squares of Jerash. Today, there are many pilgrims from various countries here. The gates, the entrance to Jerash, are still standing. You can see it today. You can go to Jordan and explore this wonderful place. Now, let's go back to the 17th century. As we mentioned, Jerash was abandoned, then covered with sediment, and was firmly forgotten. However, the idea of the New Jerusalem was certainly not forgotten. The idea of an exhibition for pilgrims seemed very fruitful and the good idea to the rulers. The new rulers of Russia, the Romanovs, could not afford to lose a place of worship for the people. During the time of the empire, before the Romanovs, many pilgrims visited distant Jerash in Jordan and left their money there. But now they needed a new venue. It was then that the decision to create Jerusalem near Moscow was made by the Romanovs. The idea was implemented, and the famous New Jerusalem of Patriarch Nikon was built. Near Moscow, not far from Zvenigorat, a grand construction project was started. It was not just a New Jerusalem but simply Jerusalem that was envisioned here. Local settlements and rivers were renamed. For example, the hill near Zvenigorat was named Zion. A male monastery was founded here. Palestinian names were drawn on the map here. The hill to the east of the monastery, for example, was named Elion. A small convent founded by Nikon was named Bethany. There was a hill that was named Tabor. The village of Mikulina was renamed Transfiguration, and the village of Zinovievo Pustosh was named Capernaum. The Istra River was renamed the Jordan. A lot was done here. It was a major state program, and it was implemented very widely. If it had been fully implemented, then, of course, after some time, everyone would have believed that Jerusalem was located on the Istra River near Moscow. No one would remember that in the 17th century, this river was still called the Istra. Everyone would call it the Gospel River Jordan. Guides would have been written that would convincingly tell that it was here that the chronicle history of Jerusalem unfolded. They would show the very Mount Sinai, which Moses climbed. And if someone announced loudly that the village of Capernaum in the 17th century was called Zinovievo Pustosh, well, of course, such a person would be regarded with the same suspicion as someone today who tries to restore the former Arabic names in modern Palestine. For example, the Arabic name of Al-Quds for modern Jerusalem in Palestine, or the Arabic name of a village, not long ago renamed as Biblical Jericho. However, the Romanovs soon halted the construction of the New Jerusalem near Moscow. The project was cancelled. The reasons for this were not publicly discussed, and construction was slowed down. After that, the Romanovs began to call this territory the New Jerusalem. They said, it was a new, not the real Jerusalem. And in general, the entire grand plan was supposedly a personal whim of Patriarch Nikon. The real Jerusalem was located elsewhere, allegedly in modern Palestine, where modern Jerusalem is located today. But why was this done? It appears that it was decided that the Romanovs, as the new rulers of Russia, are unworthy of such a sacred place as Jerusalem. And so, Nikon's project was rolled back. It was decided to build a sham Jerusalem in another place. The real Jerusalem on the Bosporus was forgotten. This information remained only for a narrow circle of insiders. After the Romanovs were denied the creation of Jerusalem, it was decided to restore it in the Middle East. They took advantage of the ongoing war between Europe and the Ottoman Empire, the future Turkey. This was during Napoleon's famous campaign in Egypt and the Middle East. Obviously, in addition to military victories, it would have been very useful for Napoleon to find Jerusalem. At that time, there was probably still information that Jerusalem was somewhere in the Middle East. It was forgotten that this was an imitation of Jerusalem. It was decided to find it. In particular, this was probably one of the goals of Napoleon's campaign when his troops entered the Middle East. But Napoleon did not find the genuine New Jerusalem Jerash, the first fake Jerusalem in Jordan. They stopped at a location about 100 kilometers away, near a small Arab settlement called Al-Quds. It's hard to say why. Maybe it was due to haste. After all, it was a war with military difficulties. They didn't find the first fake Jerusalem and decided to stop nearby, approximately 100 kilometers away. The settlement of Al-Quds was designated as the new fake Jerusalem. After that, routine work began. In these places, they hastily began to discover the so-called Jerusalem sanctuaries. The work boiled over. Historians began to fervently and sincerely argue that these places were indeed described in the Gospels and the Old Testament. Today, they show us the holy sites in modern Jerusalem. The main sanctuary is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It is believed to have been established a long time ago, even in the 4th century. However, at the same time, it is known that it was repeatedly destroyed and completely demolished. The existing church that you will see when you visit Palestinian Jerusalem was rebuilt in 1810. This is the early 19th century. So, very late. Other sanctuaries that were supposedly here earlier and were destroyed by preceding invasions, wars, fires, and disasters were also restored very late. All of this happened in the late 18th to early 19th century. Regarding Golgotha,
Anatoly Timofeyevich, I apologize for interrupting. Regarding the Holy Sepulchre in modern Jerusalem, the main argument put forth by proponents of the version that Jerusalem in Israel is the genuine Jerusalem, is the annual miracle of the holy fire at the Lord's tomb. In other words, they claim that if the new chronology described the events accurately, then the holy fire would not descend. What can you say about this?
we have a dedicated study on this fire. We will address it separately. We will explain when and why this custom, which is highly revered today, originated. In our book, we show that this custom and its modern interpretation do not in any way prove that the Palestinian Jerusalem is the genuine Gospel Jerusalem. This is a separate and very interesting subject that we will certainly discuss. Regarding the argument that Palestinian Jerusalem is the genuine holy place, there is another point raised. In 2016, they did decide to conduct excavations and open the tomb of the Lord. This was done. However, everything they found appears quite meager. They discovered a pile of stones and dust. When they removed it, they found a limestone shelf on which, we are told, the body of Christ lay. They also found a marble slab. That's all they found. Therefore, today, we cannot speak of any serious evidence. I repeat, we have a separate study on this topic. It can be found in our books, especially in our book, Biblical Russia. There, we analyze in detail in which years, why, and how the Arab settlement of Al-Quds was declared the Gospel Jerusalem. Regarding Golgotha, I'd like to say a few words. Nowadays, a chapel is presented as Golgotha. Here are modern photographs showing the sectional drawing of the structures in modern Jerusalem. There is the Lord's tomb. As it is believed, this is the Gospel Golgotha. All of this was constructed in the early 19th century and even later. Now, let's return to Jerash in Jordan. Our book extensively discusses what you can see in Jerash today. Gleb Nosovsky will have a separate narration discussing the correspondence between the description in the Russian Chronicle, the description of the 16th century pilgrimage, and the pilgrimage specifically to Jerash. This description fits perfectly with what we see in Jerash today. Now, in conclusion of our story, I'd like to share a narrative about the mosaic map that was discovered in Madaba, Jordan, in the late 19th century, known as the Madaba Mosaic Map. This map depicts Jerusalem and its surrounding lands. What is this map? The town of Madaba is located in the northwestern part of Jordan, 30 kilometers south of the capital, Amman. It is there, on the floor of the Orthodox Church of St. George, as shown in the photograph, that the mosaic map was discovered. Although it has survived partially, it contains a wealth of information. Historians believe it to be the oldest map of the Holy Land, and we agree with this assessment. It is indeed the oldest depiction of the Holy Land. The map was excavated in the late 19th century, and it is believed that the mosaic was created during the time of Justinian I. What makes it remarkable? The center of the map features an image of Jerusalem. Furthermore, the name of the city is written in plain text on the map. There is a large inscription in the mosaic, written in red. It reads, Hagia Polis Ierusa, with the end of the word being damaged. It is simply written, Hagia is holy, Polis is city, and Ierusa is Jerusalem. The last three letters, lim, were knocked down, and there are no tiles in this place. In other words, it plainly states that this map shows the holy city of Jerusalem. Historians say this, and in this case, we fully agree with them. Archaeologists correctly identified the main city depicted in the center of the Madaba mosaic as Jerusalem of the Holy Land. Let's take a look at the map. Naturally, this map is presented in books and on the internet today. Many different images of it can be found. We visited this church, and the map was open for us to see. We thoroughly and meticulously photographed it in its entirety, along with all its fragments. In the center, you can see a portion of the mosaic that depicts Jerusalem in great detail, showing its layout, alleys, colonnades along the sides of the alleys, and the main temples, which are depicted very intricately and are easily recognizable. I will immediately inform you of a very important conclusion we have made. It is asserted that this map perfectly corresponds to the map of Jerash in Jordan, which is the first false Jerusalem. Comparing this map with what you can see in Jerash today demonstrates that it is indeed the same place, the same city. It was the first pretended Jerusalem. A second assertion is that this Madaba map does not correspond at all to today's Jerusalem in Palestine. There is no resemblance whatsoever. The map of Jerusalem, both the modern one and the map of the Old Jerusalem made in the 19th century, bears no resemblance to the Madaba map. Therefore, this remarkable map indeed contains evidence that Jerash is the first new Jerusalem created after the genuine Jerusalem, the Gospel Yeros on the Asian coast of the Bosporus, was plunged into oblivion and left as a holy place only for the initiated, while a new Jerusalem Jerash was made for the people, for ordinary folks. With this, I will conclude the first part of our presentation about our book titled, Phony Jerusalem. In the second part, Gleb Nosovsky will talk about what we saw in Jerash, its correspondence with the description in the Russian Chronicle. Thank you for your attention.
In our next podcast, Gleb Nosovsky will continue the story about the expedition to Jerash, the results of which are described in detail in the new book by Anatoly Fomenko and Gleb Nosovsky, Phony Jerusalem. See you in a week.
До встречи через неделю.